Hello there, and thank you for tuning in to see what the world looks like through atheist eyes. I'm Frank Zindler from American Atheist Press, and once again today, I will be your host on a channel dedicated to showing the world what it looks like to atheists. In a recent program, I introduced you to Rebecca Williams, a young woman that I met at an atheist meetup sponsored by a group calling itself Omnipresent Atheists. Today, I wish to introduce you to another member of that talented and interesting group of people. His name is Mike Colón, and today we will be hearing how he found his way from conservative Christianity to a life free of supernatural support. As you will see today and in future interviews, not everyone follows the same path to the world of reason. Let's let Mike tell us about the path he has traveled on the way to a life of reason. In a previous program, I introduced you to Rebecca Williams, a young woman whom I met at an atheist meetup sponsored by a group called Omnipresent Atheists. In that program, Rebecca told us of her somewhat painful and stressful journey from being a Latin Mass conservative, ultra-conservative Catholic to being a Darwinian skeptic and atheist. I found out that many atheists really enjoy learning how other atheists found their way to the light. And so today I have a guest whom also I met at that same meetup. His name is Mike Colón, and among the things that we're going to discuss is how he found his way to atheism. And I think you'll find this equally interesting. Mike, thank you for being on my show.
Yeah.
And I have to compliment you on your plastic surgery. The remains of the horns that they removed, I cannot see it even though I'm very close up. And your prosthetic lower limbs are really good. They are hiding very nicely your cloven hoofs. And nobody would ever guess what an evil person you are, being an atheist. Seriously, Mike is an extremely nice guy. And I'm sure you all know, since most of you are unbelievers anyway, that he doesn't really have cloven hoofs. The horns, well, anyway. All right, Mike. I think our viewers would like to know, where did you start? What was your early religious training? How were you reared? And then we'll go into what changed your mind and how you came to be here on my show.
Well, first of all, my first memory of a church was something called, I remember it as being called a gospel hall. That's kind of a vague description, because I know that gospel hall could mean anything. But from what I remember was from this church, they had an interesting setup. I think it's kind of a historical traditional setup. Was they had pews right here, pews right here, pews right here. They were set up kind of like amphitheater. I'm guessing in a square towards the middle, and of course there was a leader in the middle,
right,
either leading music or leading the sermon. They were against accompaniment of any kind, including piano.
Well, there are no pianos in the Bible, you know.
So that was my first. That was also my first experience with a cappella music, which I'm still really into. I love a cappella music even now.
Mike is quite a singer, so
yeah.
I hope sometime we'll be able to have him on and we'll do a musical performance.
But so there was that, and that was only for a couple of years. That was like the first. That was right when I got into second grade year. I started. We moved over to Fundamentalist Baptist. And then third grade came along, and I actually went to the church that was run by that Baptist church. It was a Christian school. So that was 8 years of my life right there. That was from second grade up through 10th grade.
So it was brainwashing for 8 years in a Christian school.
Five days a week Christian school. Then Sunday came around on morning and evening service at that church. So their teachings were young Earth creationism, and King James version only
Yes.
type of stuff.
Yes.
Against rock music, against a lot of secularism, anything that they considered secularism, including Christian rock. So, Bye Bye Michael W. Smith, anything like that. I'm sure a lot of liberal Christians know who I'm talking about when I say Michael W. Smith, Wayne Watson, Twyla Paris, stuff like that. So I kind of enjoyed a lot of it, and there were times when I was like, well, this is kind of boring, but I actually enjoyed a lot of the I would listen to the sermons. I actually kind of enjoyed, especially they had something called revivals.
Oh yes, well this
revivals were something where they had a traveling preacher come to their church.
Yeah.
And for a week long, and I actually looked forward to those because even though it was like every night
was
a sermon,
entertainment. Sure.
it was because typically they would have a speaker come who was definitely a lot more enthusiastic. One of them had like a puppet.
Oh.
And so for the first part of his for the first part of his service, he would entertain a lot of the kids, and
puppet
even
gospel.
Yeah.
Or is it the gospel for puppets?
Yeah, but then he would also have a really interesting sermon, a lot of interesting things to say about the Bible and everything else. But I still looked forward to those things.
Now, at this school, you studied science, right?
Yes.
And what was that like? What was your science teacher like?
Okay, so my science teacher, he still, even though he was a young Earth creationist, and he was, if I remember right, he was either a geocentrist or he had a big part of his curriculum explaining why geocentrist isn't that silly. So,
wow.
But despite the fact that now I'm not obviously I'm not a geocentrist, and I believe in evolution. Despite all that, that science teacher, he still inspired in a lot of us the need to learn more things, the need to. It was just his teaching method, the need to explore, to ask questions, to look into things more. Don't just accept don't just accept what you read. But he was one of those fun teachers. Everybody has at least one of those fun teachers in their past that were like, yeah, I want to be like that guy. I want to be a teacher because he was a fun teacher. He inspired you to actually learn. You looked forward to going to his class. So that's like a very good example for me.
Yeah, this is some cognitive dissonance for me. You see, I mean, being taught to think by a geocentrist.
Yeah, exactly.
What's wrong with this picture?
It's something that would if I ever told anybody else.
It's a beautiful irony.
What?
It's just beautiful. Yeah.
He's a geocentrist, and yeah.
That has to be true. Nobody could make something like that up.
So, but yeah, from then on, the question that all those hardball the questions that of is all this really true or is it all bullshit was still in my head, and then I would just be like, well, no. What this guy is saying, he kind of puts it into perspective. A lot of the church leaders at that time were, okay, yeah, they're putting my doubts to rest. I'm okay, but then I don't look into it myself. I don't, explore those doubts that I've been having. From after that church, after 10th grade, and we found a lot of controversy in the church. I don't want to be that open about it. I don't want to badmouth the church, but we didn't like how the controversies were handled, stuff like that. I do have a lot of friends from on my Facebook that still go to that church. So,
sure.
But I will say that there are still a lot of really good people at that church, at that school. Like I said, the teacher, a lot of the teachers actually. But after that, we left. We kind of went from church to church, trying to find that church that better fit how we would that would just satisfy our what do I want to say, our belief system
and your value system
and our values,
value
you know.
system.
Yeah. Progressively went a little bit more liberal and more liberal Christian. We were okay with more contemporary type music and stuff like that. And
so then you got to a
yeah.
different school.
Yeah, we went. Then we went to. Well, I went to for a while. I auditioned and went to performing arts high school.
Oh.
So that's where I got a lot of my music training and stuff like that. Well, I started my music training. Another one of my teachers that I really loved was my music teacher back at the Christian school, and he taught me. I started learning the clarinet when I was in fourth grade. So I still have a clarinet at home. I need to pick that out to start playing it a little bit. But I love music. A lot of that started there when I went to the Christian the Performing Arts High School, which was a public school. I solidified my love for music, and I kept wanting to go into more training there. All the questions of my doubts about religion, about God, were still there. I pushed them away, thinking, well, no, I'm on the right side. God's on my side, and
then you got to college.
Got to college. A lot of people say when you get to college, a lot of those things, like, oh man, you're in college now. So now you meet all these different people, all these different views just come flying at you.
I have a stack of books that I bought from an apologetics company on how to stay a Christian in college, or how to stay Christian in college.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big worry. It's a big worry.
And a lot of it was just meeting new Christians too. It was like different Christians with different views, and just like, well, you think other translations of the Bible are okay, and they were like, well, actually, the NIV, the New International Version, is closer to the original than the King James Version. I'm like, what? And I'm like, so King James Version isn't the best one. Yeah. So just all these different views. I met some atheists, some agnostics, some people who were just not religious, who were just like, well, why do I have to be religious? Why do I have to be a Christian to be a good person? That was a big question for me that kind of opened the door for me.
Now tell us a bit about this, because as we were talking before starting this show, you mentioned that you were very deeply engrossed in the moral arguments,
yes.
the ethical dimensions of belief and non-belief, and salvation and this kind of thing. What would you like to share with our audience about your ethical and moral ruminations on Christianity?
Well, I would say that I used to go along with the idea that without God there can be no objective morals. There has to be a God. Without God, you could just go out and kill people, rape, murder, pillage, just run rampant, throw things against the wall, anything. Just, anything goes. Anything goes without God.
Yeah, so, now that you're an atheist, I assume before we got together today, you killed at least one person.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, just on my way here, I had to fill my quota. No, but it was one of those things where I was like, and then I looked around, and here's what created such a problem for that. I looked around and I met all these new people that didn't have religion. They were such nice people, nice people. People who were full of joy, just positive, who would never think of hurting anyone, who were charitable, and then what's your religion? Who do you believe in?
Mhm.
They were like, nobody.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't
Yeah.
believe in God. No.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do I have to believe in God? And it's like, and then I'm struggling with the idea of, well,
A
if there-
stereotype was being shattered.
yeah, a stereotype was being shattered. Then there was the dogma being shattered, where it's like, good works is not going to get you anywhere. You know, the Bible tells us that
Faith, not works.
yeah, the Bible tells us that good works are not enough. You know, and then I was like, how can I come to the conclusion that this person who is so full of joy, who is so positive, who is a good person, well, that's not good enough. They're still going to get thrown to hell. They're still going to get thrown in the lake of fire because they did not go through the act of asking Jesus into their heart and becoming a Christian, becoming born again. And I'm like, oh, that creates such a problem for me. That creates such a like, I can't come to that conclusion about that person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they die, they're gonna well, oh, sorry, you didn't accept me. You gave to charity. You were a nice person, but you didn't ask me into your heart to be your savior.
Yeah.
Lake of hell for you. So
How then did you get from where you've just let off? How did you find your way into atheism, and how long did it take?
Well, it started with that. It started with that realization. I had to look into that. I owed it to myself. It's a big, important part. You know, salvation deals with life and death. So you have to look into that. Is it true or is it not true? Just, there's not enough evidence for it. I started with having to look into that. I had to read up on it. I think I said before that I like looking up debates.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of debates about that specific subject, about morality in the Bible. Just when I see what the presentation of both, I realize that objective morality, even from religious point of view, at least from a lot of the sacred texts that are presented to me, that objective morality isn't even present there. You know, when you have someone, you have a supreme being telling you, "Thou shalt not kill," and then says, "Wait a minute,
Kill the parasites, the Jebusites, the Hivites, the Moabites."
And there's been people who have told me, friends and family members who have told me, well, there's a good reason for that. And I'm like, well, okay, but the problem is that even at that, there's still an exception to the rule.
That's exactly it. Yes.
He said, "Thou shalt not kill," and then he said, "Except, well, I have some exceptions. I need you to go kill some people. Thou shalt not steal." Well, unless you're a group of oppressed people who are escaping.
Plunder the Egyptians.
Yeah, plunder the Egyptians, or spoils of war. When you defeat your enemies, go ahead and take their stuff as your own.
And their girl children.
And their girl children too.
Yes.
Just all those things. It's like thou shalt not lie. There's exceptions to that rule too. Some of the liars even got praised for lying. There's the story of the woman who hides some Jewish spies.
Sure, right, yes.
And she lied and said they're not here.
Yes, exactly.
And she
but
got
actually,
praised for
there
it.
is no commandment against lying as such. It's thou shalt not bear false
witness.
This is what you do or don't do in court. So, thou shalt not lie is not really one of the commandments. Yeah.
But there's a lot. There's just.
So then, how did this lead to the atheism then?
So how it happened was I ended up coming to the conclusion eventually that, okay, maybe people don't actually need to believe in God in order to go to heaven. They don't actually need, as long as God can look on their heart and see they are a good person. God automatically, one of my favorite verses in the Bible was in 1 Samuel where it says man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. So it's not our position to judge people, but God can look on your heart and see, well, he's a good person. It doesn't matter that he doesn't believe my plan of
So
salvation.
even atheists could go to heaven?
Even atheists. So, and then at that point I was like, well, why do I have to believe?
Okay.
It's like,
wow, this is
so
an interesting chain here. I've not ever heard of this.
That was one of the things. You know, I was like, oh man, this is kind of devastating for my beliefs. It's like kind of a major turn for me to just go, well, maybe I don't have to believe. Then I was like, okay, I have to look into this because this is such a change. So I have to look into. I came to the conclusion that rather than just pushing what atheists said away, maybe I need to look at what they're saying. I need to listen to what they're actually saying. Look at what they're. Then I started looking stuff up. Then I started going, okay, what that person says. Okay, then I need to look over here. What's the Christian saying? What's the other theists? What are they saying? And I'm like, it's not satisfactory over here what they're saying, and what the atheists are presenting presents more of a problem for the theist arguments. A lot of the theist argument, a lot of religion. I think we talked about this before, but a lot of the arguments from a religious point of view, it's full of the argument fallacies.
Yes, yes.
Then, so I had the morality issue. I was like, okay, the morality issue creates such a problem for religion. I got to look at the other things too, philosophy and science. The whole, was someone here? Did someone have to be here to create the world? Then I started looking up Colon's cosmological argument.
Cosmological argument, yeah.
So that's such a tongue twister in itself.
Yeah.
But then you look at the argument made, and the argument is a tongue twister. It's just when you're
it's a brain twister.
And when you're watching William Lane Craig explain the cosmological argument, you're like, what is he trying to say? And you know, finally you're like, I gotta look this up and try to figure out what it is that he's trying to say. And people, and I've looked up what a more point by point description of what it was, and to the point, and I came to the conclusion that I was like, well, all he's really saying is, well, someone had to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was like,
well, you know, Mike, I've often felt that with these apologists, it's obviously they can't use logic.
Yeah.
And so all they can do is try to baffle you with bullshit.
Yeah.
And you know, you have this. I think we all have a proper respect for authorities.
Yes.
Not authority, but authorities. And so, even though I've studied physics, I'm not a physicist, and so I have to defer to Einstein and other minor people like that. But with regard to ordinary things, when somebody who appears to be an authority says something, and you don't understand it, you say, I don't understand it. It must be profound. It's beyond me. But he knows. Okay, and this is, I think, where William Lane Craig is so good. He comes across really as a self-confident authority on anything that he's debating, and so he commands this reflex. Well, because I don't understand it, it's too profound for me, but I'm sure it's correct.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you found your way past William Lane Craig.
Yes.
Good for you. Not everybody does.
I think the biggest thing that still made me hold on to religion was I was like, well, if I'm looking at science, and I'm like, well, there's so many people who say science doesn't disagree with religion. Science and religion can coexist, and so I was like, okay, I can keep going with that at least. And I'm not a scientist, but you know, I can look things up and look up and try and see where, you know, this is a trusted source as opposed to a not so trusted source. What I found, just coming to the conclusion, it's not my own conclusion, I've heard this before, but what I come to the realization that there is a big difference between science and religion. That a lot of people don't really, a lot of atheists are like, who try to be a little bit more nice to religion.
Mhm,
They try
yeah.
to say, well, it's okay. Science and religion doesn't cancel out.
Non-overlapping megasteria.
Yeah. So, but what I came to the conclusion was science and religion differ in one major aspect, and that is that science is allowed to go back and disagree with itself.
Exactly. It's a self-correcting system.
It not just allowed, but it demands
That's
to be.
right. Yeah,
It demands
exactly.
to be challenged.
Yeah.
All the great scientists. There is no such thing in science. In science, there's no such thing as a sacred book. We don't have sacred books in science. You can't go back and say, well, Darwin said this, so that means it's true. No, you're allowed to, in fact, there's a lot of scientists who say, well, there's some things that Darwin said that
Oh,
aren't
well,
true.
he was completely wrong on genetics.
Yeah.
So,
Darwin is not our father.
right.
So you're allowed to go back and challenge everything that has been said.
Absolutely.
In religion, you're not allowed to do that. I'm sure that there are some religions that out there that you're allowed to go back and challenge what that guy said, but at least from what I've seen of the religions that I've come in contact with, especially with Christianity, you're not allowed to go back and say, well, Paul said this, but I don't agree with him.
Right.
So I mean, Paul is like Paul wrote so much of the New Testament that a lot of Christianity is based on what he said.
Yeah.
So for you to go back and say, no, what Paul said is wrong.
No, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
So now, was there any sudden moment, any sudden unreligious experience
Oh yeah.
that put you over the wall to the point that you then suddenly said, I myself, yes, I'm an atheist?
Coming to looking at all those things, I ended up sitting back and going, all right, am I an atheist or am I not an atheist? Is there anything for me to hold on to? I have to be. For me, atheism is about being honest. There's nothing that I can prove. There's nothing that all the religions, all the religious debates, they all come to the conclusion that they all use that conclusion of, well, you can't prove me wrong. You
Right.
can't prove
Yeah.
that there is no
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah.
and I come to the conclusion that I'm like, well, that doesn't mean that I have to still believe.
Yeah, yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that, all right, I'm an atheist. I can't prove that right. Why do I have to believe?
Mhm.
And do I really believe?
You're free.
And it was like when I made that full realization that I'm an atheist. I think I told you this before, but there's this feeling that people say that they have when they become a born again Christian. This feeling of this lift of burden off my back. Kind of referencing Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes.
Where the main character, he has a burden on his back, and when he becomes Christian, the burden is lifted. The burden is broken off his back and falls down the hill. That's what being a born again Christian is supposed to feel like.
Mhm.
I never had that feeling.
So you were a born again atheist.
I'm a born again atheist. So that feeling when I was like, oh, I'm an atheist, I was like, there was a huge weight lifted off my shoulder.
Right.
I had that, I guess I have that feeling every time I open up to my family, come out to my family, I came out to my mom, my father, to all my friends on Facebook. And I had, it is, for at least from my experience, coming to the full realization that you're an atheist is like, it's that burden being lifted off your back. And I was just like, what? And some people watching this might be like, well, of course you're an atheist now, so you can be free to do whatever you want to do. But I was like,
so right after this show, you're going to rape a nun or something.
Yeah, but it's not like that. It's just the fact that I'm free from that system where you now have that realization that you don't need a supreme being
Right.
to tell you what you
You
need
can
to
do it on your own. You can do it by yourself.
Yeah.
You can, yes,
Yes.
you don't
So
need somebody.
it is liberating to just make that realization, that to just say, well, I'm an atheist. I don't believe. I don't. And I guess people want to know what the difference. A lot of my friends and family want to know what the difference between an atheist and agnostic.
Mhm.
And I try to tell them, well, look, if you call me an agnostic, you're being very vague.
Mhm.
That's like you might as well call me a Homo sapien, because you're an agnostic is just someone who has come to the conclusion that they just can't.
They can't decide.
They can't know.
Yeah, they can't know. Yes.
Agnostic deals with the whole thing about knowledge. So agnostic is, well, we can't know that there is a God. So I turn that around and I say that with religion, if you can't show it, then you don't know it.
Exactly.
So
an agnostic is an atheist.
So an agnostic is actually when you think about all of the religious leaders and stuff like that, how many of them do you know will say, well, I can prove to you that there is a God?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody can show it.
Right, right.
They say, well, I do know, but if you don't know, then you can't show it. So all you do is believe. So at that point, you're an agnostic too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You're a theistic agnostic.
Yeah.
So now, how many people does that description describe?
Yeah.
If you're a theistic agnostic because you believe in God, you can't prove that there is a God. You can't know for certain that there is a God, but you believe. You might believe really.
They won't have any proof though.
So agnostic is basically a very vague thing. So
Yeah,
you can
it's
be
not very
a
useful.
theistic
Yeah.
or you can be atheistic. So that's why I consider myself an atheist, because I don't believe in God.
Good.
So
Mike, what would you like to say to our audience? Your final thoughts about things. What would you like your audience to know?
I do have, I guess putting this out on video obligates me to it. I do have a blog. I've had maybe four entries on it. It's called Atheist Mike on Tumblr. That's TUMBLR.
Okay.
I guess
We'll fly that on
Yeah.
the screen during the editing of this
Yeah.
show.
But it's Atheist Mike, like one word. My biggest message to people is to ask the hardball questions. I forgot to mention some of the things I'm reading right now. I am reading Case for Christ,
Mm-hmm.
Lee Strobel, by Lee Strobel. It's a Christian.
And you'll read about his trashing of my
Yeah,
views on
I've gotten
Nazareth.
past that. Yeah, what's interesting about Lee Strobel's Case for Christ is that Lee Strobel says he was an atheist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the problem with the book so far, I'm like halfway through it, is that he doesn't interview any atheists. He doesn't interview any skeptics.
No. Mm-mm.
So, I understand that when you're writing a book about Jesus, that you want to interview people who believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
But your book is dealing with the skepticism of Jesus as well, because it's
Sure.
called The Case for
Sure.
Christ, and
Yeah.
you're dealing with a lot of the skepticism of Jesus. So you need to interview some skeptics.
Right, right.
And there's I'm on the chapter right now where he's talking about the Jesus Seminar. Now, you could interview people from the Jesus Seminar. The Jesus Seminar is a group of people who...
I was on the Jesus Seminar.
You were on the Jesus
yes.
Seminar. So it's people who are more
Yeah.
skeptical of the traditional view of Jesus.
But these were the real Bible scholars. I mean, scholars with a capital S.
So you have a chance to at least reach out and try to interview someone from the Jesus Seminar. But there was no effort there.
No.
He instead interviewed people who were critical of the Jesus Seminar. So it's like that's where that book is so fallacious.
So people should ask the hard questions.
See, people should ask the hardball questions, and I understand doing that. A lot of people might view that as a sin, just throwing God hardballs.
Yeah.
You know, you're throwing God hardballs. You're throwing Jesus hardballs, and a lot of people who and not just Christians, but like, okay, throw Muhammad the harballs too. So
yeah, right, yeah.
that's,
yeah,
but
yeah.
a lot of people, I don't like. Either they're afraid of the answer or they're afraid of the.
Yeah, thou
that
shalt
it's a
not
sin.
test the Lord thy
Yeah,
God.
exactly. They're afraid that it's a sin. You know, asking the hardball questions. Make sure you're wearing a rubber suit so you don't get struck by lightning. So ask the hardball questions and listen. I think that's a big problem that's creating such a problem with arguments is that we don't listen to each other. It's anyone from the atheists who don't listen to Christians or the Christians who don't listen to atheists, we need to listen to each other. That's a big one for me. So
Very good. Mike, I want to thank you for being on my show, and as a token of my gratitude, I have a set of my collected short works through Atheist Eyes that I'm going to give you. Volume 1 is essays on religions and scriptures.
okay.
Volume 2 is essays on science and pseudoscience.
Oh yeah, I'm also a big one into pseudoscience too.
Volume 3 contains annotated transcripts of some of my more interesting debates.
Yeah.
And last but not least is Volume 4, which I call Omnium Gatherum. That's everything else. It's philosophy, political science, a lot of humor. Many of my Dial and Atheist comical things are in here.
Okay.
Poetry, and even a couple of musical scores. You'll find the music in here and the words for Rutabaga Baby, the theme song of this show. So Mike, thank you so much for being on my program, and I'm sure that our audience will be edified by what you've said.
There's one more thing I'd like to say.
Okay.
I would like to also say that I'm very, very grateful that I have friends and family members who are accepting of
yes.
And that's something that I can be grateful. I've heard of stories of people saying, well, I'm an atheist. They come out to their family and their family just turns their back on them.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't have that. Even
I'm
with
shunned.
my parents are still Christian and they're still very strong in their beliefs, but they are very accepting of me. They did not turn their back on me. They still pray for me, but they are very they're very accepting of me.
They sound like loving
yes,
human beings.
Exactly. So,
All right.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. That'll be all for today. I'm not quite certain what we're going to have up for the next program, but tune us in to check us out. For now, I'm Frank Zindler for American Atheist Press and for American Atheists.